Typically in BoxCutter, whenever you're working, you can just draw a shape and you can press 1, 2 for Y mirror. You can press 3 for Z mirror. And from here, you can just begin mirroring on all the axes. However, you might have noticed that whenever I press 2 to enable Y mirror, that it immediately clamped my shape. That's because we could also press Shift 2 in order to flip the mirror axes of the Y to actually flip and be on the correct axis of the Y. We also attempt to do our best by bisecting the shape to ensure that whenever you move it, that you are able to have the shape fluidly join with itself and not have any sort of issues with shading or artifacting that would come with the shape simply overlapping. In order to show that in action, we could press D and bring open the BoxHelper where we can look at our slider for mirror that's already expanded. And if we were to turn off flip, we could see that there's now artifacting happening because the shape is overlapping. Or actually it's bisect, my mistake. When we turn off bisecting, we see that there's terrible artifacting due to the shapes overlapping. So whenever you're pressing the 1, 2, 3 keys, we're attempting to smartly optimize the way that you mirror the shape so that it prevents the artifacting, but it also mirrors it in a way that you can quickly get in and do things you need to do. For example, now I'm beveling, but we don't have a bevel that's dominating from the center area coming out. Unless we were to move the shape really far, then we could bring it back, but we're able to just simply bring the shape into itself and simply collapse the other sides of the bevel just out of existence. And sometimes it could be an effective way to work. In fact, when it comes to BoxCutter, telling the right side of your mirror is going to come down to where you see the dots. So if I were to just drag the dots over to the other side and press Shift Y, or actually Shift 2 in order to flip it, we see that we're now able to work on this side of the Y axis. So this is the sort of flexibility that we wanted to give users whenever it came to setting up mirror as a start state. So typically whenever you had mirror as a start state, things would be a little problematic, but now you see that I'm able to go in and draw on the X, Y, and Z axis all at the same time without any sort of issue. And really this is something that if you're using one of the older versions of BoxCutter, you can actually compare it with the mirror at this time. In the helper, you'll see that sometimes it will just disappear or turn itself off, and that was because the way BoxCutter was built wasn't really optimized for the slider system that I'm trying to have implemented. However, I do feel that the way that users will be dealing with things in the future will more than likely be through this small D helper, where we can quickly just turn off wedge on the fly if we need because it's just a simple slider. But we can also have our mirror settings just continue to persist across uses, and we could quickly even bring up the helper to ensure that those settings are indeed set in stone. So another instance in which the mirror can be advantageous in the ways I discussed is with N-gon. So if we were to press D and we jump over to N-gon, I'll just begin drawing an N-gon shape. And we have it predominantly on the X plus of the side, but if we draw some X minus detail as well on the other side, we could press 2 in order to mirror this on the Y, or 1 to mirror it on the correct axis. Let's say we didn't want this side, we could simply just press Shift 1, and now we're actually dealing with the other side of the shape and approaching it from a different angle versus us just pressing 1, flipping it off, and then pressing 1 to activate it again, and now we're working from the other side, and we could tell which one is the real side because our draw dots are in place for us to make modifications to the shape on the fly. But in a nutshell, that's basically the new mirror slider in action. Its goal is to just allow users to press D, simply go in and just click what axes they want. They could choose to bisect it if they wanted to show it properly, choose to turn it off if needed, and even choose to flip override it if they're trying to go for a different result altogether. So here we're actually turning off Y, and we can see one of the small nuances of this system is that whenever it comes to using the flip axis button, that it does tend to get a little squirrely. So if we did want to flip this, we could simply just press the axis that we're using, press Shift 1 in order to flip it. And the reason is that we can't actually flip it on an axis that has no data. So if we were to flip some of these axes, we would actually get an unsatisfactory result. So there's overrides inside of BoxCutter where if it detects that there's not going to be any mesh as a result, it's just not going to let you enable that because that would be problematic. But that's one of the reasons that you may see some of these settings flicker whenever you're using them, is because BoxCutter does have overrides in place in order to prevent you from creating situations where you simply have no shape to deal with at all. And of course, in this point, we could just press tab and the dots will appear exactly where the shape is that's real, and we can get in and start dealing with the bevel, click to apply, and just like that, we're able to perform this cut without very much issue.